There was a time I couldn't look in the mirror without flinching, without wincing, not because of how I looked, but because of what I felt. See, when I was first diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, I started seeing my body as a problem to fix, not as something to fight for. See, I struggled with this sense of value, this sense of worth, right? And for me personally, I was diagnosed at the age of 19. So I was in college and I was a collegiate athlete. So I felt like I had a lot going for me, And as an athlete, I had some misconceptions about diabetes and thought, how do I have diabetes as an athlete, right? But when I looked at it deeper and certainly learned about the ins and outs of type 1 diabetes, learned about the autoimmunity, I felt like I was broken. I felt like for the first time in my life, I had weakness. I had a vulnerability, right? I had something that made me different. And for me personally, I had dealt with lifelong insecurity for no reason, honestly, just my own brain fighting me. And this made me more insecure, gave me a reason to believe that I was less than, that I didn't belong, right? And I didn't know many people with diabetes, let alone type 1. And there were phases of my life with type 1 diabetes where initially I ignored it. Not that I didn't take my insulin, but I didn't check my blood sugars, I didn't count my carbs, certainly didn't try to manage it. And I was told that you're going to die in 10 years, you're going to be filled with complications along the way, and there is no hope. My medical team was terrible, truly. They tried to scare me into controlling my blood sugars. And in today's video, I want to break it down in a slightly different manner. No science, no blood sugar formulas, but empathetically discuss this challenging situation that most of us deal with, but nobody talks about. In fact, I actually do want to talk about what nobody tells you about body image after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis. I want to talk about the mindset shift that finally set me free. I also want to talk about the moment I realized I didn't trust my own body anymore after it attacked itself. Now, if you don't know who I am, I'm Matt Van de Vecht. I'm a T1D expert, I'm a best-selling author on type 1 diabetes. I'm a certified master fitness trainer and nutritionist, and someone who knows what it feels like to hate your own reflection, even when you're doing everything right. So if you've ever felt like your body was broken, if anything in this episode hits for you or feels like you've experienced it, I want you to comment the word worth below if this message hits home. Now, when I was first diagnosed, I wasn't given any hope. I was told that I was going to be dead in 10 years and I'd lose legs and arms on the way, right? And I was told you can't ever eat carbs again of any kind. Life's going to suck and it's all terrible from here on out. That doctor does not deserve to still have his license for what it's worth, because there is hope. And thankfully, I did hear that message eventually. But when I was first diagnosed, I'd look in the mirror and see somebody who was broken, somebody who didn't deserve a seat at the table, somebody who was no longer strong. I felt like this thing that I had to deal with wasn't a challenge to be overcome. I thought it was a roadblock. I thought it was the end of the road for life as I knew it. And unfortunately, I didn't have anybody to tell me otherwise. So I believed the stories that my mind was telling me, that type 1 diabetes was the end of the road. And for me, that looked like rebellion. It looked like not taking care of myself. It looked like throwing away my glucometer, essentially. I chucked it in the corner of the room, never to be used again for at least a couple of years. I feel really bad about this, but not too long after getting diagnosed, I moved from San Diego to New York City to pursue modeling and acting. And I actually made a name for myself. I ended up doing that for 7 years, made it to the top 5% of the industry, and without selling my soul. Proud to say that. But while I was living in New York, my family in San Diego, my mom called me one day to check in. She did amazing things like that all the time. She sent me care packages, making sure I was okay, even though I was an adult. But she called me and she said, Matt, how have your blood sugars been? And I said, I don't know. And she goes, what do you mean you don't know? I was like, well, I don't check them. She's like, and just silence, right? And I could tell she was concerned. And as she should be, right? I have this life-threatening disease that I'm not taking care of, and she knew that. And she warmly tried to let me know that I should probably be taking care of myself. And it wasn't for a couple years until I actually was dating this really cute girl. I mean, really cute. I ended up marrying her, so it worked out pretty well. But when I was dating my now wife, then girlfriend, that was finally the reason for me to start taking care of myself. Realize I got to be here long term if I want to be with this girl and maybe even start a family someday, right? I'm starting to realize that type 1 diabetes wasn't a death sentence, but it still took me a while to be okay with the fact that I had a chronic disease. And this is something that if I really took time to think about, it's hard to not get stuck in the cycle that we are broken, that there's something wrong with us, right? And I think that the biggest challenge with that is that we feel isolated, we feel alone, we feel like there's nobody else going through this stuff that we have to go through. And the good news is good news, bad news. There's a lot of us, right? A lot of people that have type 1 diabetes. So a lot of people do get it, right? But the better news is you're not broken. This is just your thing. Everybody has a thing. Everybody has a challenge. Everybody has something that they struggle with. Now, for us, it's something that is invisible to others. No one sees our diabetes, right? Unless they see our devices, but it's an invisible illness. Nobody sees the low blood sugars, the high blood sugars, the 2 a.m. site changes, all this different stuff until it manifests, surfaces, what do you want to call it, through complications, through the physical manifestations of the disease, right? But with it being an invisible illness, it can feel isolating, it can feel difficult. And what nobody wants to tell you about body image, but also of mental health after a type 1 diabetes diagnosis, is this idea of a shift in perception of how you perceive yourself. See, I perceived type 1 diabetes initially as a weakness, as a vulnerability, as something to be hidden. I would rip off my CGM for weeks, months at a time after I got a CGM because I was embarrassed. I didn't want people to see me as different. And that truly, if I really were to dig into it, is rooted in insecurity, right? I didn't want people to see me as different. I didn't want people to ask questions. Hey, what's that thing on your arm, right? So I just didn't wear it. And it took me a long time to get okay with that. I would only put it in places that I could hide, my lower back as an example, even though it wasn't approved. Now I can say that because it's been like 10 years. I was not wearing it in approved spots because I didn't want anybody to see me. Right, so there's this body image thing where, and for people, it's different for everybody. For some people, like me, it was more about looking different. For some people, it's about the weight gain after diagnosis, right? And I work privately with type 1s, and I'd say about half the people I talk to want to lose weight because after diagnosis, they gained weight. And they also realize that losing weight with type 1 diabetes is quite a bit harder than it is without type 1 diabetes, right? And it's not just that after you get diagnosed, you gain the weight from getting on insulin, which, real quick side tangent, insulin does not make you fat, okay? I take insulin and I am not fat. I have what used to be a six-pack. I've lost a little bit, all right? But that's just my own negligence to my cardio. So, there's fitness models out there. There are literally people who have won fitness competitions who are type 1 diabetics. So don't tell me that insulin makes you fat because somehow they didn't get fat. But also, just fun food for thought here. I'm trying to be careful how I say this, all right? Non-diabetics produce insulin as well, and non-diabetics are not all fat, right? So if insulin made us fat, literally every person in the entire world would be morbidly obese because everyone needs insulin to survive. Fair enough? Okay, we can move past that. Now, that doesn't mean that insulin doesn't make it more challenging. Insulin technically is a fat storage hormone, so taking insulin enables you to store the calories, the nutrition that you've been consuming. So before diagnosis, when we were not on insulin but actively dying, going into DKA likely, right? You were peeing out a lot of the glucose that you consume. We're getting off track. This is me. I have ADHD. We'll be right back to our main program in just a sec, all right? But just side tangent with me for a second. You pee out glucose before you're diagnosed. You get diagnosed, you get put on insulin so you can survive. And when you start taking insulin and functioning as a non-diabetic would, having insulin to store the food that you've been consuming, that food no longer gets peed out in the form of urine, which is what pee is. So that's kind of a weird thing to say. But it also stores that food, right? So when you take insulin, you are enabling your body to actually store the food that you've consumed, which is why a lot of us see weight gain. When I was first diagnosed with type 1, I gained 30 pounds in 30 days. That's insane, right? So for me too, I was a skinny little kid, so I was like, woohoo, I'm finally gaining weight, Thought it was a good thing. I thought I was an athlete. I was like, I'm putting on so much muscle as a collegiate athlete, No, it's just insulin kind of helping me process that food. All that to say, some people, the body image is not about the devices, it's about the weight, right? Because losing weight with type 1 is difficult. And if that's something you struggle with, I'll put a link in the description. I'll put it up here as well for you. We have tons of resources on that because it doesn't need to be extra difficult. You got enough to deal with the blood sugars, but the blood sugars are part of the reason why weight loss can be more difficult. Think about it. You go work out and then you go low. You have to consume calories just because you worked out, and then you never burned enough calories in the first place. You actually end up gaining weight in some cases, right? It's maddening. It's not fair, I know, but I'll put something in the description for you if that's you. Now, the other side of this body image issue that a lot of us run into is the fact that we're different. The scar tissue, the injections, the extra routines that we have to deal with. There's a lot of pieces behind your type 1 diabetes management that don't get accounted for in the doctor's office. And that's one of the first things that I wanted to draw attention to, is that there's more to it than meets the eye, more than just what you go see your endo for, right? It's not just insulin, it's not just blood sugars. In fact, my book, The Blood Sugar Freedom Formula, we talk about how there's over 50 plus variables that make blood sugars go up and down, which is insane, right? I want you to take a second to think about that. I can't control my blood sugars. Yeah, of course not. It would be unreasonable to get it right the first try, right? Because there's so many things to consider when dealing with blood sugars. I mean, it's not just, did I take enough insulin for my carbs? It literally also comes down to the weather, hydration, your stress patterns. Did you sleep well last night? Did you exercise yesterday, right? Like, all these things affect blood sugars. So it's no wonder that we experience the weight of type 1 diabetes management on our mind as well. Something I'm passionate about, because a lot of people tell you, oh, just deal with it. You try covering 50 variables every day and not getting the results that your efforts would make you think that you should get, and then just keep dealing with it for years and years and years, right? So, this whole piece leads me into my second point. When I stopped trusting my body, right? Before I knew about the 50 plus variables, before I knew all the different pieces behind blood sugar management, I thought that I was doing everything possible and still messing up. So when you do everything you're supposed to do and still don't experience results, it's natural to assume maybe you're the issue, right? And that's what I thought. I'm thinking, okay, I count my carbs, and this is years into my diagnosis, by the way. Multiple years into my life with type 1 diabetes, started dating that cute girl. Remember, she became my wife later on. So that's when I decided 4 or 5 years in, I was like, all right, I'll start testing my blood sugars. I'll start counting my carbs. We're going to start managing this thing so I can actually live a long, healthy life. So I start trying, and it doesn't work. I'm like, I counted my carbs, I went low. The next day, I counted my carbs and I went high. What the heck is going on, right? So I stopped trusting my body because I thought my body is just trying to make things more difficult for me, that this is just an unfair piece of diabetes. And my endo suggested that I had brittle diabetes. And I made a reference to this in a post on social media recently. There's some discourse in the comments, and people were not happy and some people were happy. Some people saying, yes, brittle diabetes doesn't exist. And other people saying, I have brittle diabetes. This isn't fair. To clarify that, because I know a lot of you also look at our stuff on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook and everywhere. I do believe that brittle diabetes is a real thing. However, I also believe that it is overdiagnosed. A lot of doctors look at your blood sugars and go, man, your blood sugars are crazy. You know what? Instead of me taking responsibility for you as my patient, I'm just going to say you have brittle diabetes. That way you drop your expectations and we can all just get along and pretend that diabetes can't be controlled in the first place, right? You can tell I'm getting off on a bit of a tangent. I'm a bit passionate about this because I have so many people that tell me my doctor said this is as good as it gets. And then I look at their papers and it says their A1C is a 7.5 and their time in range is 60%. And I say, as good as it gets. Let me put this on screen for you. This is my current 90-day report for my blood sugars. Average glucose, 121. Time in range, 99%. My A1C, I need to get it rechecked, but it's probably in the 5s. It can be controlled. And this is coming from somebody who was literally labeled as brittle type 1 diabetic. Pisses me off when people give up on type 1s who simply want more control, more freedom, more flexibility. And they are given up on because the medical system doesn't know what to do. I get fired up about this because there's people out there who are dying. And if they're not dying, they're suffering because their medical teams lack the expertise to give them what they need. And what they need is a personalized plan, a formula. And it goes by many different names. You don't have to have a formula to survive, but you have to have one if you expect to thrive. Life doesn't end at the diagnosis, though I thought that it did. I thought, because I was told to think, that I can never have carbs again, I shouldn't expect to control this, and it will kill you. That's what I was told by my medical team. So now that I've proven 6 months at 99% time in range while living my life without giving up fun foods. I had tacos for lunch today and pancakes for dinner last night. Been 100% time in range the whole time. I did sprint intervals for 20 miles on my bike today and stayed between 66 technically, so I was a little bit low, but 66 and 109. Those are non-diabetic numbers while exercising really hard. Can you control diabetes? Yes. Is it easy? No, but it is simple. Drives me nuts when I hear people have been given up on, or that people have been told to drop your expectations. You're good enough. Stop trying so hard. Why would they put us down for trying to take care of our health? That to me is a broken system. And the mindset shift that finally set me free was one, realizing that I had to take responsibility for my own health. Number one, you have to take responsibility for your own health. No more waiting on your doctor or your endo or your dietitian, whoever you're waiting on. You do not need their permission to start looking at your own data. Your blood sugars are leaving a breadcrumb trail for you. And I tell this to you to give you hope, not to put you down, but to lift you up. You can do this. The patterns are right in front of you. And all you got to do is start with awareness. Pay more attention to them. Journal. Look at your blood sugars because they are crying out to you. This is what makes you spike. This is what makes you drop. And the more often you look at them, the easier it gets to find these patterns that are going to give you more stability. Okay, now it takes a lot of time to get mastery. In fact, it took me 2 years of daily experimentation and research and trial and error, obsessing over my blood sugars to figure out what we now teach on and with our private clients that have type 1, with blood sugar formulas, specifically the 80-20 blood sugar formula. That's what I use nowadays to hit that 99% time in range, right? But number two is about finding balance. Right. And if I could give you one main piece to focus on, for most people, that's it. I assume because you're here, you're taking responsibility. So number two is to focus on balance with your body, with your blood sugars, but also with your efforts and your time, because control without balance typically looks like effort and restriction maxed out. You can't eat fun foods. You have to work really, really hard and babysit your blood sugars, and it's just not sustainable. It's also not fun, because who cares if you get to the end of your life, perfect blood sugars, but you didn't live your life, right? There's the balance aspect that you have to consider. And when I went through that 2-year period of daily, hourly experimentation and obsession, it was exactly that. It was obsession, it was a lack of balance, and it was not sustainable. And when you put in too much effort and too much restriction in order to get the control, you risk burnout. And I absolutely have burned out a few times. I have a video on that as well, because burnout is very real and you need to protect yourself against it, because burnout can lead to pretty scary outcomes, right? Where you stop caring. So in order to reduce the risk of burnout, you have to depend more heavily on balance, which comes from formulas, right? We use blood sugar formulas because it allows us to have more certainty and confidence in our dosing and in our strategies. It's how you can maintain control without giving up your freedom or your flexibility, without having to rely heavily on effort and restriction. Because the effort and restriction will get you control, but only to a certain degree. You'll never unlock true mastery. And that's what I found before we discovered blood sugar formulas. And this is exactly what I use in my own life as I was pursuing becoming an Ironman, right? Building a 7-figure business, being a dad at home, and living every aspect of life while my blood sugars stayed above 90% time in range. You can do this, but there has to be strategic intention behind this. You can't just willy-nilly just try harder, right? Trying harder does not always yield success, especially if you're running in the wrong direction. Restriction will build some structure, but it's not going to allow you to be free. So you have to do this the right way if you want to build sustainability. If you want your results to be sustainable, something you can hold on to, it has to be done the right way. If you want help, happy to see if I can help, but this is why I make these videos as well. This is why we build resources. This is why we have a community of thousands of people living with type 1 diabetes, because without these specific steps, you will never achieve true mastery. You're dependent on a system that is broken with the medical teams that do not know how to help you to this degree. And unfortunately, it leads you to spin out and burn out because effort and restriction will not yield the results that you are after. I want you to understand that it does get better. It's not easy, but it is simple. And it's okay to raise your standards. You got to take care of yourself. Mental health is critical because if you don't care, you're not going to do what you know you need to do. So take care of yourself mentally, take care of yourself spiritually, take care of yourself physically. All aspects matter. It's critically understand the balance behind all of this. Happy to help where I can. In the next video, we'll break down some of the actual formula components so you can learn about the physical aspect of controlling blood sugars as well. I hope this was helpful. Let me know if it was. I'll see you in the next video right there where we break down the formulas behind blood sugars. I'll see you there and keep up the fight.